Wow.
From rally.
Wow.
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 Wow. And then, whoa.
Listen, race cars are beautiful. They've got curves for days, nice and tight on the inside. What I wouldn't give just to get myself inside of one. Well, not without protection, of course. But these gals, they aren't cheap. Even a one-night stand is likely to run you a few $1,000s at least. And do I look like I've got that kind of cash laying around?
Have you heard the quality of my microphone?
But what if I told you that you could get all the challenge and thrill of professional racing without having to even leave your house, and for a fraction of the price? Racing simulation may have started with nothing more than a mounted steering wheel in a dream, but these days? Forget about it. Daytona, Le Mans, Indianapolis, Nürburgring, Nürnberg. All the most legendary tracks in the world have been laser scanned into perfect digital recreations of themselves. The most famous race cars in the world can be experienced from your own bedroom. In the modern day, you don't need to have thousands of dollars or good connections to have some idea of what it's like to hustle a high-performance race car around some of the toughest and most intense race courses on the planet, because sim racing has evolved to a ridiculously advanced stage. However, since the whole point of those types of games is to simulate real-world physics, there tends to be a lot of
Son of a bitch!
sim racing tries to mimic the difficulty of driving a real race car, a task that is by default a very difficult thing to do. Any good simulator has to not only be almost impossible to control for the average person, but also penalize your mistakes in a way that's true to life. That means you're not allowed to hit anything, touch anybody, overuse your tires, breach the track limit, race within 5 feet of Joey Logano, because any one of those mistakes is enough to ruin your race in an instant. So the sad truth is that for all the advancements the genre has seen over the years, there isn't a single racing simulator that will ever be more fun than this. Burnout 3 Takedown is 18 years old and is to this day the most fun I've ever had in a racing game. You see, unlike how cars in a simulator operate, the cars in this game can actually fucking take a hit. They're able to shove and grind against each other without completely losing control, and the same goes for walls too. You can totally just wall ride on most of the turns, and your only penalty will be that it'll take you a little bit longer to get around the track. It plays like a racing-themed power fantasy that encourages the player to be as aggressive as they can behind the wheel. And this creates a racing experience that's packed with thrill and satisfaction to a level that realistic racing could never even hope to achieve. Because in reality, nothing that can be done in this game is even remotely possible. That is the built-in limit of any racing simulator: reality. Sim racing doesn't let you experience what it's like to pass 40 cars in just under 2 minutes, or the satisfaction of taking a heavy stock car and drifting it completely sideways at over 170 miles per hour, or the bullshit chaos of launching your car off course through a forest of trees that you have to cut down with your saw blades, then having to seal the cockpit as the car plunges into a lake, and then having to resurface so you can jump back onto the track while other drivers are screaming past you at full speed. Because if racing simulators did let you do those things, they wouldn't be racing simulators anymore. And that's not to say that aspects of reality are always bad news for racing games, because some of the greatest racing games ever made base their physics off of how cars realistically behave on the road. The problem with that, of course, is that the average person cannot fucking drive to save their life. So for a racing game to find wide appeal, developers have to consider what they can do to deliver experiences that feel believable, but are forgiving enough that people like this can still have fun. And Gran Turismo 1 is one of those games that finds a good balance between believability and accessibility. The bodies of the cars roll and tilt realistically, they have a believable weight to them, it's all very nice stuff. This game does a lot of things well, but I think there are two things it does stupidly well: satisfying controls and giving feedback to the player. In a lot of other games that go for the Simcade style of realism, they don't let the car drift out sideways very much. It's all kept very by the books because they want to keep things accessible enough for the average player. And as a result, the cars tend to seem kind of boring to drive because there's not really much that you can do with them. They're very safe, very reserved. But in Gran Turismo 1, you can pretty much get any of these cars to go sideways. They're really reactive to bumps and weight shifting, but rarely to a degree that takes control away from the player. When cars get sideways at all, they're given this boost of rear grip that lets you power through your slide with the gas pedal, whereas similar slides in lots of other games would leave you flying hopelessly off the racing surface. You never feel like a god like you do in Burnout 3, but it's still rare to ever feel like you aren't in control of the action even when the car starts to get out of shape. Then there's the way the sound design and visual design work together to inform the player on how their car is handling, which is a criminally overlooked detail in most racing games. As soon as you start to make any turn, the tires immediately start to make sound and smoke. There's hardly a moment in this game where you can't at least faintly hear your tires straining under the pressure of your own driving style, telling you exactly how hard you're pushing the car at all times. The tires are unnaturally loud, but it makes it so much easier to judge how close you are to pushing things too far, which is something you need because you don't have the benefit of being able to sit in the car and feel how the car is handling through the seat. I respect the shit out of racing games that go out of their way to change how certain aspects of the sport work in favor of making the experience better for the player. Especially in contrast to the racing games that try to be more realistic, but instead are made less realistic because they ignore that there are built-in limits in gaming. For example, here's a side-by-side comparison of how NASCAR drivers hold a steering wheel when turning versus when they're driving straight. That's a pretty big difference. Now, here is what those exact hand positions would look like using the analog sticks on a controller. It's a fucking centimeters difference. That's so much harder to control than being able to hold a steering wheel in your hands and having that entire range of motion to work with. That's the kind of shit that developers have to plan around when making any racing game. The controllers that can be used, the information the player is going to have access to, hell, even the number of screens a player can use and the size of those screens is something that developers have to keep in mind in order to deliver a quality experience to as many people as possible. And to me, some of the best games are the ones that consider all the different ways that players are able to interact with the game and are designed so ingeniously that even with the most basic of gaming setups, nothing feels missing from the experience. Daytona USA works just as well on an arcade machine with a wheel and pedals as it does when played with the analog controls of a PlayStation 3 controller. Need for Speed Underground 2 can be played in a bright room on a crappy little tube TV from like 20 feet away, because the game designers did an incredible job making sure that there's always an obvious visual contrast between the player's car, the road, and all the walls and obstacles the player has to watch out for. Gran Turismo 1 came out only 1 month after they started putting analog sticks on PlayStation 1 controllers, and as a result, you can play the whole damn thing with the arrow buttons. The arrow buttons! And neither the nuance of the handling or the player's sense of control are lost. So I don't want to hear about how Forza 7 or whatever feels better with a steering wheel instead of a controller, or how the NASCAR Heat games are way more fun when you're playing them with friends. Fucking every game is better with friends. That's not even a credit to the game. I'm not interested in games that are only good when played in a very specific way. I'm interested in games that are good and fun no matter how you choose to enjoy them. I'm interested in games that were built as video games first and whatever fucking real-world fantasy supplement second. That's where my indifference towards realism in racing games comes from, honestly. I know people play racing games for all sorts of reasons, but I'm just out here trying to have fun, man. That's why less realistic racers are so exciting to me. They can bring you to new worlds, drop you into ridiculous scenarios, let you pull off moves you could only dream about on a real racetrack. I can't wait to see what crazy-ass racing games are waiting for us further down the road. Show me racing games brimming with creative freedom. Show me racing games with soundtracks and visual styles that stand out from what everyone else is doing. Show me Mario Kart 9. I like to play Mario Kart with my big brother, but sometimes he gets mad at me for using the blue shell. But I like the blue shell because sometimes I mess up and it...